There's a massive gut component to many people's mental health issues. 95% of serotonin is made in the gut, 50% of dopamine, and inflammation is an immune system issue. 75% of that is made in the gut. And looking at the research around chronic stress and shame and trauma and even intergenerational trauma can literally be stored in our cells. But look, that's why I write books, because I realize not everybody's gonna come to my telehealth center. Now everybody's gonna set up a consultation or put their poop in a fry dish and send it out to a lab like you did.
The brave ones will. Just even doing my own tests at home, whether it's the Dutch test or the stool test, I'm seeing a lot of correlation between my gut health issues, inflammation issues, hormonal. It's all kind of tied together.
Huge.
Let's start with gut health, because I think everyone has so many questions about gut health, and I think a lot of people's issues kind of stem from gut health in general. Why do you think so many people in today's society are having gut health issues to begin with?
Well, in short, it's a mismatch, right? It's what researchers refer to as an evolutionary mismatch or an epigenetic genetic mismatch. So 99% of our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 years, but yet look at our world, right? It's the foods we're eating and the foods we're not eating, chronic stressors, environmental toxins, collective and personal trauma. All of these things are kind of coming to a head in many ways. And there's sort of this, I think, collective reckoning that's happening in the form of our physical health. And even if you think about this, is that we are, if they've learned nothing else in this conversation, we're a part of nature, right? And we are just a microcosm of nature. Humanity in its ultimate hubris likes to think we're separate than nature, but ultimately we're just part of it. And you think of what's happening from a climate change standpoint and what's happening environmentally from a, let's just say, global warming or sort of a global inflammation is how I think of it, where it's causing a lot of dysregulation on a planetary level. That's exactly what's happening on our microcosm level, is that there's a lot of dysregulation and climate change, if you will, going on in the human immune system, because it's in the form of chronic inflammation. It's sort of a physiological global warming. And a lot of that has to do with our gut microbiome, which is intimately connected to the soil microbiome in our world, in the actual soil of our planet. So it's a big conversation, because you really can't talk about gut health without talking about massive topics that are very complex. But to put it short, it's an evolutionary mismatch, and our microbiome, which is co-evolved with us, which in many ways we can say it's co-evolved with us, but we are here because of it. We would be all dead without our gut microbiome. So in many ways, we're sort of a sophisticated hosts for the microbiome. I think of the 90s cartoon, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where I think his name was Krang, the villain with the brain inside of the huge robot. We are Krang, if I'm even getting his name right, because if that brain leaves us, we are the robot. We'll just fall dead, because we need it to metabolize food. We need it to make neurotransmitters. We need it to regulate our immune system, regulate inflammation levels. I mean, it's massive. So our gut and brain are formed from our same fetal tissue. When babies are growing in our mother's womb, they're grown from that same fetal tissue, and they're inextricably linked for the rest of our life through what's known in the research as the gut-brain axis, or the connection between the gut and the brain. And 95% of serotonin is made in the gut. 50% of dopamine, our sort of pleasure, happy neurotransmitters, are made in the gut and stored in the gut. And 75% of the immune system is made in the gut. So it's why we're seeing so many gut health problems. It's these confluence of factors that are big, but are really, and the variables are different for different people. But these are the things that I can quantify with labs and look at someone's health history and look at the pieces, like what are the most relevant pieces to your puzzle to start healing your body? Because you really can't heal. In most cases, you really can't heal mental health issues or hormonal problems or autoimmune problems without taking into consideration your gut.
So with all of these environmental triggers and things that maybe we can't control around us, what can we control when it comes to gut health?
The foods we eat, it's a good place to start. I mean, talk about gut health. Every food we eat is either going to feed inflammation or fight it. And some in negligible ways, like some in ways you're not going to notice, so don't stress about it. But like it's like the bigger areas we want to look at, like what are the most significant needle movers, both positive and negative, to really mess up your microbiome, which in turn is going to mess up your mood and your mind and your brain health, and also mess up your hormones, and because of that, and inflammation levels. So, starting with that, what I would call the inflammatory core four, if they haven't done this, I would look at someone's relationship with these four things. Plus, if I could add plus one, it would be the first four would be industrial seed oils. Like look at things like canola oil, soybean oil. You know this. I mean, this is just like It's not that is inherently bad, and maybe that's controversial for me to say in the health space. It's, in my opinion, more to do with the out of balance ratio of these polyunsaturated fatty acids. Like we need healthy omegas 3, 6, and 9, right? They're all important. But the human diet, again, evolutionary mismatch, is so pro omega 6 and omega 3s is so low, so that ratio is off. So the problem in my mind isn't to demonize PUFAs, these canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, grapeseed oil, say that they're inherently bad all the time, but okay, the ratio is just off, and they could be pro-inflammatory because you're kind of eating out of alignment with how your biochemistry and your microbiome has evolved. But for the sake of simplicity, looking at those foods and the overconsumption of them, looking at things like gluten-containing grains, which most people have heard of, right? It's like an expletive in the health world for the past 15 years, but it's what we've done to it, right? It's the hybridization. It's in many ways, in some grains, the genetic modification of it. It's the spraying of glyphosate on these grains. So it's not a simplistic answer of just demonizing wheat, but it's saying there's a lot of variables to consider of why there's an evolutionary epigenetic genetic mismatch of it triggering inflammation in many people. Some people tolerate better versions of wheat, like sourdough bread. It ferments some of the gluten to make it more digestible. It's being easier on your gut, basically. And ancient grains, again, less changed, more in alignment, sort of decreasing the chasm between epigenetics and genetics. And then dairy, same thing. What we've done to the dairy world is just insane. Sort of the crossbreeding of cows, and that's why you're seeing. And then, in addition to the crossbreeding of cows, it's the grass that the cows are eating, the grains that the cows are eating. And most cows are not grass-fed, and that's how they've evolved to be. And that's why you're seeing all the grass-fed things out there, and the A2 milk is the subtype of the dairy protein that is more ancestral. So we're eating more in alignment with what dairy our ancestors would have eaten, and it's less inflammatory because of it.
I've noticed, so everything for me comes out of my face. So when I eat processed sugar, canola oil, things that have gluten, it comes out as acne. And when I do go to Europe or even back to the UK, I don't struggle with acne even when I'm eating gluten. So that's been something I've noticed. But I also agree with you. I think it is to do with the fact that we're maybe in a less anxious state. And also I'm walking a lot more on vacation. So I don't know if that's helping me with the digestion of everything. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's an interesting thing to look at. In terms of mental health, why do our guts affect our mental health? And then conversely, can our mental health affect our guts?
You really can't talk about mental health without realizing that mental health is not separate from physical health. Mental health is physical health. And instead of us relegating mental health as sort of this separate thing where you just have this sort of abstract chemical imbalance that really is flimsy science at best anyways, like what's actually causing this massive epidemic of mental health issues in the world? Well, the researchers have been looking at this for the past decade plus. This is nothing new. I just feel like functional medicine has been the voice, sort of the microphone for the research world, the gut research world, basically. And what is very clear is that there's a massive gut component to many people's mental health issues, and different bacterial colonies, like beneficial bacteria, different types of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium are associated with low levels, are associated with things like anxiety and depression. There's other studies that show different dysbioses, different bacterial imbalances in the gut are actually a causative role in different neuroinflammatory autoimmune problems. It's researched in different autism studies as well, fatigue, brain fog, chronic fatigue syndrome as well, and many other autoimmune problems. So we have to realize that this is implicated. There's a massive gut component to this. And as I mentioned earlier, 95% of serotonin is made in the gut, 50% of dopamine, and inflammation is an immune system issue. 75% of that is made in the gut. So to understand, and what the researchers refer to it is the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. Like, how does inflammation impact how our brain works? How does inflammation impact mental health? But it's bidirectional, right? And I think that we need to realize that it's, and that's why I call my newest book, I call it Gut Feelings, because I want to talk about the gut and the feelings, because they both are interplaying and cross-talking with each other all the time. And physiological things, like I just said, the gut problems, the inflammation issues, like stealth infections, like mold toxins, chronic Lyme, will drive anxiety and depression, brain fog, and fatigue. We just have to figure out what variables are at play for people. Nutrient deficiencies would be on that list too. But the feeling side will also impact your physical health. And I think of all my people that have autoimmunity, and looking at the research around chronic stress and shame and trauma and even intergenerational trauma, how those mental, emotional, spiritual things can literally be stored in our cells, dysregulating our nervous system, raising inflammation levels. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, it's a bit of both for most people. And that's where health history and context will determine for the individual what pieces are the most relevant for me. But for most people, it's going to be a bit of both, the mental, emotional stuff and the physical stuff that's impacting their mental health.
So if someone came to you and let's say they had a mood disorder or they were struggling with mental health and they wanted to start a diet or a lifestyle that would help them with that or help them manage that, how would you begin to approach it?
Well, it's the unsexy stuff first, where it's like the health history stuff, and nobody wants to hear that. But it's like, it's normally me spending an hour plus with them, really asking them like in-depth questions and like clinically just investigating things. And one of the things that we talk to patients about is what's called an adverse childhood experience question. It's score, basically. The higher ACE you are, it's associated in the research with more likely to have different inflammatory problems later on in life, different mental health issues, different autoimmune issues, different metabolic issues like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, things like that. So it's not just that. We'll also talking about gut health in detail, endocrine, hormonal health in detail, how they were born. I mean, babies that are born vaginally versus C-section have different microbiomes at the beginning of their life because the first microbiome donation we get is from our mother. And then were we breastfed or not? Like, these are things that we didn't have even decision on, but we have to know cumulatively what's our story. And we all have messy, not perfect stories. It's not to stress anybody out. It's just saying, what are the pieces to my story? And no matter how bad that story may look like to you, the human body is resilient. Like, you are resilient, whoever's listening to this. And it's not to be overwhelmed or like shamed or feel like, what the heck, I'm screwed. Like I'm up against as the worst. I see people up against the seemingly insurmountable, overcome these health issues and heal. So if it starts with that stuff, labs are there if you want it and are needed for some people. But look, that's why I write books too, because I realize not everybody's going to come to my telehealth center. Now everybody's going to set up a consultation or put their poop in a fry dish and send it out to a lab like you did.
The brave ones will.
Like, yeah, I mean, I'm there if they need that. That's what I do 10 hours a day. I look at labs for people. But I realize, like, I'm meeting people at different parts of their journey. So when I'm on my podcast talking, I'm thinking, okay, that's thousands of people that may not get a poop test, but they're going to go and learn things from listening to us talk today, right? And the book is a great resource because really what I did is just boil down, like, what are the top gut action items and feeling action items that I've seen in protocols be the best, most effective needle movers for these people that I love. So that's what it is. Start with food. I talk about in the book a GAPS protocol, which stands for gut and psychology syndrome or gut and physiology syndrome, which is a lot of soups and stews, which is really restorative and nourishing and grounding to the gut-brain axis. So that's a great resource to do over the protocol in the book, and I have many patients do it. And And then, the feeling action items are so many that I talk about, but I mean, things like breath work, meditation, EMDR, somatic experiences, self-compassion practices, there's so much, but it's about learning what resonates with you and what's the most relevant for you, and then staying consistent with it.